and I need to record this. Okay, sorry about that.
Yep.
And I need to
All right.
resend Molly her credentials.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really weird. You can't search the email where you're sharing the Zoom link because you share it directly from Zoom, right?
For the way I have to set up these meetings, yes, I have to send it directly from Zoom.
Yeah, so when you search your email from you, it doesn't show up in your emails because it
Really?
must come from a different address.
It's archived somewhere.
It's hard to find it
Right.
if because I search for Karen's WLS email.
Okay. Well, the first item on our agenda tonight is the approval of prior meeting minutes. You should have received in your packet the minutes for the regular September 14th meeting, as well as the special September 21st meeting, and everyone was in attendance for those meetings. So if you need a moment, if there are any questions or comments for clarification, we can entertain those at this time. If not, I will entertain a motion to accept both minutes.
So
And a
moved.
second, we have Amanda, and a second, Cecilia. All those in favor of accepting the minutes for those two meetings, please say aye.
Aye.
Any objections or
Aye.
abstentions? I did overlook one thing. I did not actually take attendance. So if you can each say that you're here. Matt is here.
Althema.
Johnny,
Amanda.
Cecilia,
Alice.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Lucinda.
Oh, thank you for joining us, Lucinda. We just did the pledge. We have a large agenda, so we got started a little bit earlier than usual. Thank you for joining us. And we're at the point seeking any public comment, but since we don't have any members of the public in attendance, move on, Karen, if you're ready, to the director's report.
Yes. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through my director's report as I normally do. I just will say that we've been rather busy, as I'm sure you can see. And if anybody has any questions about my report, I would ask that you speak up.
I don't have any questions, but I just have two comments. Ignira's, the newsletter that she did, I thought was very cute. And she also referenced us to a video that they made for the children's department. And I love the video. It was really engaging and really very impressive, I thought.
Good. I will
I
pass
agree.
along that feedback.
Thank you.
She'll appreciate that.
And I also liked all the work that Diana had cited that she's been doing with her department in terms of exploring racism and the resources that are available. It was quite impressive.
Yes, I'll pass that along too.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I like the fact that you're starting full staff meetings, Karen,
Yes.
right? Quarterly, that everybody can get together remotely
Yes.
on, I guess you said either Wednesday mornings or Tuesday nights or something,
Yep.
you know, and I think that's really good from a team building perspective.
Yeah.
I thought that was really
absolutely.
good. And in the minutes for that meeting at the end, somebody asked about the survey that Grant Schneider did.
Yes.
Did he do some sort of staff survey too?
Yeah. Yes, he did that back in the late spring.
Oh,
for
okay.
us. And we're just
Okay, I
circling
wasn't
back
aware
to
of
it
that.
now.
Okay.
Yeah. So he went over the survey results with myself, the department heads, and I had Mallory and Allison attend that meeting too. And those results will be presented also to the rest of the staff.
And is there a top line, like how is morale? Like, well, I guess
he said it was.
we're not an exec, right? So we can't do this.
No, but
right?
I can tell you, he said that
Okay.
the results were very good and positive, and they clearly show
Okay.
places where we need to improve, which is why we do these things.
Exactly.
But overall, he
So that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
He said it was
I'm
good.
sorry, I missed that, Molly.
Oh,
Good,
just-
that's good to know. I
Yeah.
was,
Aaron, I was wondering when you talked about the professional development for the staff, is there a maximum number of programs or time that a staff member can spend on professional development in a year or a 12-month period?
We don't have anything set. What I asked them to do is to clear their professional development with their department head so that the department head can decide, is this something that they should be spending time on? Is this maybe not something? So that's how we do it.
Are there any guidelines that both the staff and the department head can review when it comes up?
For things like short webinars, we don't really set too many parameters. We just make decisions based on what we think is best. For more extensive types of professional development that maybe require more staff time or fees or travel, not so much travel anymore, then there is a process I have people follow. They have to do a written request. Their request has to meet certain parameters. Their department head has to sign off on it, and I have to sign off on it.
And is there any minimum number of events or time that you recommend someone who wants to advance their career be involved with?
So librarians who received their master's degree after, I think, 2010 are required to get a certain amount of CE credits within a certain period of time. I don't remember what the numbers are. So they are, in order to keep their license, their librarian license, they have to follow, they have to do a certain amount, and they have to submit it to the state themselves. But for everybody else, and even for them, I ask the department heads, I really rely on the judgment of my department heads to make good recommendations to their departments for what they think they should be doing as far as continuing education. And we try to be as supportive as possible when people do request, because it shows good engagement, and people really appreciate being given the time and the opportunity to do these things. And that really helps with being a good team.
I feel your pain on updating job descriptions. Good luck.
Thanks.
Does Greg Olivo get to look at them to make sure they're compliant with the American of Disabilities Act and stuff like that?
We're not really upgrading the job descriptions. We can't because they're set by civil service. What we're doing is we're creating performance evaluation metrics based on the job descriptions. So for each particular position, we will take areas of work and concentration from each job description and create like an expectation or a standard in the performance evaluation document. There are some people whose jobs are more specific. I'm thinking particularly of Allison Robbins, who is a librarian 1, but she is particularly technology and training. So for her performance evaluation form, I will be doing some custom areas of specialization for that one.
Okay. And then Molly was, I think,
I'm going to turn my camera off because my bandwidth isn't good.
Okay. All right. I noticed that Molly's description of the grant writing process for Mobile Beacon was kind of more gleeful than I expected. I really
that was Mallory.
enjoyed.
Mallory.
That was Mallory?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going, wow. Not what I expected in connection with grant writing.
So Karen, do I see another phone number? Is that?
Yeah,
Jim?
who is that?
That's John Tortoso calling in.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
hoping that he can unmute himself. I've been trying to unmute him. I know he had trouble last time.
Jim said he's trying to get in here. It was at 7:09. He sent me the email. So
Okay, maybe I need to resend his link. Let me see. I'm going to resend.
it'll be a couple of minutes.
Okay, I just resent him the link just in case. And John, if you can't speak, I just resent you the link again too. You may want to try going off and going back in. I also, as part of my report, well, not really as part of my report, but I included the long-range plan implementation matrix from the long-range plan that is currently wrapping up. I have to give a big thank you to Kathy for formatting in a way that can be read by people. So that's, you know, it's not something that we need to spend a whole lot of time.
Well, being read is a
Talking
relative
about.
term. It's like in 0.7 font.
Yes. Yeah.
What
So
a
it's one of those
magnifying
good
glass.
things to enlarge on your screen.
Right. So Karen, when we get Jim and John with us, should
Mhm.
we relate that to buildings and grounds, and then we'll do HVAC, and we'll do the leave the stormwater separately, or present them simultaneously, since John Tortosa will be with us?
Yeah, I'd like to cover the both Jim Dolan's HVAC plans with us, as well as the repairs. I want to make sure that we cover the repairs that are needed while both Jim and John are on with us.
Okay.
And yes, if we can get just an overview on the stormwater from John, that would be great.
Okay. So they're not with us yet, are they?
Karen, going back to the oh, sorry, Matt.
No, go ahead.
No,
Oh, going back to the long-range plan, I think in the previous meeting, you asked if the policy committee would look at it. And I guess provide comments to the board in short comments.
Mhm.
Did you still want us to do that, or?
I
What are
think
your
that's a
thoughts?
wonderful idea. I don't remember saying that, but that's okay. I don't remember a lot these days.
Well, let me ask
Well, if you ask at the front desk, they could help.
along those lines. Next week, we're going to be interviewing long-range plan consultants.
Monday, the
So
26th.
it would probably be good for everybody to have, you know, carefully read this so we can reference it in the conversation with the consultants, right?
Mhm.
Can I just ask that strategic be spelled correctly?
Strategy.
Where is it misspelled?
It's misspelled on every single page at the top. It's strategic, not strategic.
Okay, yes, that
It's
can
a
be
spell
corrected.
check. Spell check.
Well, spell check doesn't always kick in Excel.
I know.
Well, Karen, I'm going to give a quick president's report, because your
Here's
report is
Jim.
rather extensive. Is he here?
yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Yes.
Ah, terrific.
Hi, Jim.
Thank you
Hi,
for
Jim.
joining us tonight.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay.
No, we appreciate your joining us, and I'm going to ask Karen to intro what areas we'll start with, and we'll take it from
Not
there.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jim. I'm still trying to bring John on. We
Okay.
we sent out the HVAC recommendations that you had prepared for us, and I asked the board to look those over. We were hoping that you could go through them with us, not in any great detail, but sort of like an overview of where we are and where you think we should go. I also was hoping that at this meeting, we would be able to briefly discuss the repairs that are needed to AC4, so that the board can understand what's going on with that and make a decision one way or the other. Does that make sense?
Sure. Did you, Karen, did you want me to go through that slide deck real fast, or just kind of jump
Yeah.
into the end? Okay.
No, let me
I
make
can-
you a co-host so you can share.
Okay.
You probably can already share.
Let me know when everyone can see the cover slide.
Yep.
Yeah.
And hello, everybody. So I will jump right in here. Sorry, there's a little blank here, but that was an image of John's handwritten notes. I don't know why it somehow in making this PDF it disappeared, but not to worry. But just very quickly, just as to serve for a little bit of background, and some of you were part of this, some of you weren't, but in 2017, we did a study of the library, which, you know, did result in this recent boiler project. But some of the key findings of that study was that the main and upper level have significant issues with cooling and heating. Perimeter space along the glass wall are difficult to condition with the current HVAC. And the well system, as you know, was having trouble maintaining constant temperatures, and that's where John was sort of hand charting the water. As an overview, this is the plan view, or kind of a looking down at the building. You can see where AC5 serves, and if you can see my mouse here, you can see the red areas, the AC5 zone. AC4 is these blue areas, and AC5 also serves that upper mezzanine. On the lower levels, main and lower, you've got AC1, 3, and 2, kind of in this area here, just outside that mechanical room, and AC3, and then that's still AC4 serves this area as well on the main level. But AC1 and 3 were also found to have smaller installed capacities than scheduled in the original drawings. So I'll touch on that a little bit. We don't want to completely revisit all of the design challenges that the building has had, but some of the detailed findings was that the existing combined well capacity was 40 to 45 tons. At least based on what we could tell, it seemed as though it's about a third to a half of what you're really were anticipating, but probably closer to a third. So it's fairly undersized. The well system doesn't have the water level controls or appropriate alarms. And as I mentioned earlier, there's some zoning issues which result in temperature control problems. So even when there might be capacity, you also have some zoning challenges, which is that in itself is not too uncommon. But without the capacity, that really exacerbates the issue. Currently, you're in what we're calling now phase 1. That's a little different from the original study. We had 3 different phases there. But phase 1 was to advance this boiler project. This week, I believe gas will be turned on. So that's good news, and sort of just in time, I'd say, to get the boiler up and tested and shaken out before the full winter hits us. We also, as part of this phase 1, took those, what they called the free cooling coils in AC1 and 3, converted those to hot water coils. So we're trying to get the hot water from this boiler out to the building. It was the first step towards a larger distribution system. Those of you who were involved, we had actually had more piping and more in the project, but based on the pricing that came in and budgets available, this had to be scaled down to the 1 boiler. But this is the first step. So we're also looking at a possible future boiler in the distribution system as it gets expanded. But either way, this is a very good step in the first step towards heating the building and really helping that well system, at least in specifically the cold outdoor conditions. Here's a few photos of the boiler room that's in there. For those of you who hadn't had a chance to get down, a new unit heater. This convector down underneath the stairwell will also serve, including that AC1 and 3 coils. This is one of your circulator pumps. You may have in your home a little tiny circulator pump, one of these little Taco 007s. This is a little bigger, and that'll circulate your water. So we were asked to update some of the recommendations, and we looked back at the building. So updated recommendations, then also speak about ventilation from the perspective of this current situation that we're all in. But we look at 3 additional potential phases to consider. Phase 2 would be AC4 going to RTU4 and RTU6 to help unload AC5. So those were our key recommendations, and I'll go into that in a little more detail. But AC4 performance has degraded since the earlier study. The energy recovery ventilator, which exchanges air between the exhausted air and the intake air. So it's not only key for energy efficiency, but it also, when that's not working, it's limiting your ability to ventilate, but also not helping you to exchange air and putting further stress on this already undersized heating and cooling system. It serves the office space, which is fairly critical to the operation of the building, as these are your sort of day-to-day people that are in the building all day long. So we felt like prioritization of a new RTU6 to serve the mezzanine. Again, taking the heat out of that top area is important, and that'll reduce the cooling load needs of AC5. So AC5, which would remain in this initial recommendation, would be somewhat unloaded, which would be helpful. Sort of looking at the roof above, and I know I'm going through this fast, but we can take questions. But AC4 here, looking at the roof, a new mezzanine unit for RTU6. This is just a bird's eye view of where those units might land. We may want to drift them in a little more as the ceiling and structural will allow to just sort of shave off a little bit of the direct line of sight from the parking and this road coming down the hill. Phase 3, so that would be phase 1, just to be the boiler. Phase 2 would be a couple of these RTUs. Phase 3 would be replace AC5 then with the new RTU5 and start additional distribution and hot water and potentially add that second boiler and install the radiant ceiling panels along the glass for perimeter heating to fix that zoning issue. And then we also carry a phase 4, which is kind of that's it. We give up on the well option and you're replacing those heat pumps with the air handling units and tying into the hot water system. I will say that, you know, our hope is that as you got through phase 2 and into phase 3, the issues would be mitigated quite a bit and maybe phase 4 wouldn't be needed. But just to illustrate where RTU5 would land, that low roof outside of the offices here, just above the mechanical room where AC5 exists is where this new rooftop unit would go. And as I mentioned, 4 and 6 would be here. These radiant ceiling panels are part of phase 3. So those are shown in that diagram. I showed 4 and 6 here. This would be the new AC5 on that roof. And then just sort of elaborating a little more on some of the zoning issues in our drawings from a while back, where we talked about where radiant ceiling panels would go, again, for these areas that were considered problematic, and also adding reheat coils. These little red boxes are reheat coils, which again would help these. I know this area over here was particularly problematic. So that was all sort of laid out in our original study. So just sort of breaking this up into those phases. You know, this would show if you had to go to phase 4, you'd start to look at these heat pumps here changing into air handlers. This is where your new boiler is right here. We'd add a second boiler. And again, if you had to go to phase 4, you'd need a new chiller. And, you know, we're really hoping that you don't get to that point. Keep in mind those rooftop units that I'm talking about would heat, cool, and ventilate. So they sort of a triple duty they would carry. So you'd add a lot of cooling as well as heating for the most part. But if we have the radiant panels and the boilers, we should be able to help with all the temperature control issues. So we were looking at phase 2, possibly starting at least the beginnings of getting that scoped out and getting prepared for pricing, so that you might be able to have some additional cooling for next summer. So that would be a bit of a foot race at this time, but it would be beneficial to start to get some help for the cooling side, since you now already have some help on the heating side. And again, that would be remove and replace AC4 with the new 40-ton rooftop unit and RTU6 to serve the mezzanine level. Phase 3, summer 2021, spring 2022. And these are rough dates, just so we're giving a little bit of a structure to this conversation. None of this is set in stone, obviously. Remove and replace AC5 with the 30-ton rooftop unit. Upgrade the wells with additional controls. You probably remember us talking about the controls for the wells. Install radiant ceiling panels, as I mentioned. Rezoning with the VAVs, with having some reheat coils, and then add that second supplementary boiler. And again, our hope is at this point, with the controls on the wells, with additional heating and cooling, you wouldn't need to get to this phase 4. But just to finish the thought is, if you had to get there, phase 4 would be replace those remaining AC units and install a 60-ton air-cooled chiller. So you'd end up with more cooling tonnage than originally anticipated when you're all said and done, and you'd then have plenty of cooling for the building for some time. We were asked to put some order of magnitude costs on each of these phases, and that's what you're looking at here. Nothing is cheap. These are all fairly significant projects. RTU4, replacing AC4, about 600,000. Doing that RTU6, the total would be about 896,000 based on our, we always caution this is an engineer's estimate very early on, but we'll talk about what you might want to carry for allowances. Phase 3, kind of looking at the rooftop unit, well system. This, you actually had a quote for the well system, so we have that number. Radiant heating and VAV zoning, we had some numbers that we could extrapolate these from, and adding the second supplemental boiler. Again, we had some numbers there. Phase 3 would be 1.6 million. And then if phase 4, if you need it, would be another 1.4. If you remember early on when we talked about the project, I said it would be I think I said it would be 3 to 5 million or something to redo your HVAC system. And, it's been a few years, and when you do things piecemeal, it's more expensive. So we're in that similar order of magnitude. Looking at it on a timeline and sort of looking at what we might say if we did do the 2 rooftop units, we might suggest having a budget of 900 to 1.1 million. Hopefully it would be under that, as our estimate showed. And then 1.6 to 2 for phase 2. And if necessary, we just carried the 1.4 forward here because by the time you got to this, that number would change and you'd probably relook at it. But order of magnitude, it's, still very significant. Let me pause there for any questions at this point before I get into the ventilation and COVID discussion. Anybody have any questions? Or Karen, do you want me to take questions at this point?
I don't know if the members of the Buildings and Grounds had any questions since they sat through this last week, and anybody else, if there are any questions. What we're getting at is that we're taking care of the immediate need for heating, and there's now an immediate need to take care of the air conditioning. But there's also a pressing need to get some controls or monitoring into the wells. So I think, Jim, I've summed up what you said so far. That's kind of what we're looking at.
That's right. Although we show the well controls in the next phase, one of the things we talked about was maybe pulling that forward, maybe doing 1 rooftop unit and the well controls. Depending on your budget, we can look at this and pull what you feel is most urgent for the library. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts?
Amanda, you're muted.
Doing the well controls also means upgrading the computer system. Is that right?
So probably some level of improvements on the computer system would be necessary. So I haven't quite closed the loop with Clean Air, Amanda, on what their thoughts were for adding in additional BMS controls. But we did, if say you decided to do RTU4 and the well controls, we did carry a decent amount of BMS number in both of these. So, a good part of what that upgrade would cost, I think, would be built into this. There may be a little uptick in that, but it should be fairly modest. Now, if we said, so that always becomes a little bit of a, management of the scope creep, because once you start putting in the new BMS and you say, well, we want everything on a BMS, and then you find out there's a sensor problem or something else, it could grow. But yeah, for the most part, I think that we'd have to put a little, cross those T's and dot those I's on the BMS to make sure that we had the capacity, and that, and I think the concern of the grounds committee was, we don't want to really go into this with an old BMS and then have other problems creeping up. So I think that's an excellent point that we need to address when we jump into design.
Thank you.
Is there a way to go less technical without using the BMS system and go more manual with the well control?
So I think, John, anytime we do this, we want to make sure there's in series with anything that's a control valve. You have the ability to open and close and adjust things. But I sort of look at it, I always say to people, like, the days of sort of working on your own car have become tough to, it just doesn't happen anymore. You need these controls to have the right eyes on the system to see the levels, get the alarms. So once you have them, yes, you can still work on it manually, but you want to leverage the controls to make sure that they're doing some of that work for you, and maybe doing a little bit of preemptive work when you can't always have your eyes on the system.
Right, but still, can you just drop back a bit so cost would come down if we did it a little more with less technology on it?
So what we're talking about is in the well field is to have like a level controller. So that would automatically be electronic and a sensor, and you tie it into the BMS. And then you want to be able to have that level controller automatically adjust the amount of water that goes back to each well. So I think, John, it would be hard to not have that automated.
And does that level of automation give Clean Air or whatever company is operating it remote access to the performance of the site?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we always recommend that there's an opportunity for a VPN dial-in to the BMS system, not only for them, but also for the library. And so you can get alarms out and you can then dial in and see it. And you can actually give somebody read-only access. So even like Karen could maybe even, say, okay, somebody says that the children's library area is warm. Let me take a quick look before I call John and see what's going on. So, but for us, when we do commissioning, we also want to be able to see how it's operating. So yes, that would be something that we'd have included. We'd recommend the contractor have that available.
And along with that comes a monthly charge also.
The ability to do remote dial-in wouldn't cost you anything, but if you're calling them up to then make adjustments and change things, you're right. That would, they would charge you service calls, or you'd, reconfigure your maintenance contract with them.
Well, right now we don't have a maintenance contract with them.
Okay. So you pay as you go with that. I mean, honestly, I think that's a preference situation. I think it's always good to have some level of a maintenance contract with a contractor, but I oftentimes don't know if you get, it's very easy for them to find a reason to still charge you when they come to the site. So, and I think, John, you probably take care of all the normal maintenance things that they would charge you for that base maintenance contract.
Well, yeah, that's how one of the things we've been doing is to cut the cost, was to do a lot of the work ourselves. So
yeah,
that was taking up a good, well, not good amount of time, but just a good amount of money.
Yeah.
Jim, I forgot to ask in our meeting the other day, were these figures updated from the earlier figures, the estimates?
Yeah, we did a whole new look at the numbers, and we sort of learned a little bit from the last one. I think a few library projects we found that a lot of contractors, because of the, at least this is the feedback we got, and I think we talked about it the last time. You're never sure if you're getting the whole story from everybody, but these types of projects are a bit of work, a bit of logistics. There's a lot of coordination, and as big a numbers as these are, most qualified mechanical contractors still see these as smaller projects.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if there are no other questions on this aspect of Jim's expertise, Karen, do you recommend we look at the proposals for the repair on AC5 at this time, or
Well,
is it
first,
something else?
Jim has some COVID recommendations for us before
okay.
that.
Yeah, this will only take a second. So we were asked as part of the study just to take a quick overview of, as we're looking at a number of facilities throughout the area here for ventilation, and make a couple of recommendations. And we've talked about this, and John is implementing, but essentially we're looking for during occupied times, you want the AC units and HVAC fans to be running to get ventilation, but you want to operate 2 hours before, 1 hour after occupancy. But you can still adjust the setback temperatures. You also want to keep outside air dampers open to improve ventilation, increase the ventilation wherever possible. However, you have limitations on your ability to increase the ventilation beyond what you'd normally say is a minimum. So, that's something that we recommend, just keeping the maximum ventilation on those units. Just as a note, when you did get to a new rooftop unit, have the ability to flush out the air and improve the ventilation. And then John's already started looking at getting additional filters, and Better Filters has done some. But MERV 13 is where things kind of settled out. There was a lot of discussion about hospital grade HEPA filters and versus 14 and 13. Just like the masks for COVID are considered very effective early on in this pandemic, they weren't really sure. MERV 13 filters seem adequate enough to reduce the viral load in the space to a certain extent. So between masks, limiting number of people, and improving the filtration. Now, the one thing is, if you improve the filters, you end up with additional filter change out, and you have to make sure that you don't, starve the units from airflow. So that's just some quick overview items on ventilation for COVID. And then, I know we want to talk about those couple of maintenance items, but next steps would be start to review and select the priority projects and budget them, and really start to get the design doc, get real costing, and then run it all the way through to testing for the best outcome. For the boiler plant, we still owe the library, once the gas is on, we'll do a controls checkout. We'll run that through full functional testing, and we'll witness all of the sequence of operations in the controls and write a full report, so that at that point you'll know that that boiler plant worked as intended. So we'd recommend the same for these projects. So I think that's all I had.
I guess my big concern is the financial aspect of it, in terms of, we talked a little bit about that in the building meeting. Karen has been really great about getting funding for us so far, but we're worried about going forward and how we can break up the projects and begin to do maybe in even smaller steps. And I don't know how this is possible, but anyone have ideas about funding, how we're going to be able to do this?
Yeah, we can talk about the funding during committee reports.
Okay. All right.
I didn't bring my checkbook, otherwise I could take care of it. So Karen, are we ready to talk about AC5?
Yes, we are. So included in your packet were two proposals from Clean Air. They're both for this, I don't want to say they're both for the same project. They're both two parts of the same problem, so they really need to both be done. And they're quite expensive, but I did want to have John and Jim here with us tonight so that, they can talk a little bit further about what this is and why these are needed in a way that you can understand, which I can't do as well. So
Yeah.
Jim or John?
Sure, I can do a quick high overview, and John can provide some detailed background. You've got, and I think they're attached, but I don't have them in front of me. But the cost for the AC5 on basically the refrigerant circuit and the piping, there was a compressor that needed to be replaced and piping that needed to be repaired. And I mentioned to Karen and John and the team that those costs did not seem unreasonable for what we've seen for similar situations. And then the other one is the basket strainers, which was $18,000, and that one seemed very high to us. So John was pursuing some other costs for that, and he had put the caveat on there that he'd asked for that quote kind of quick and just said, "Give me what you can." So I think that was really just a first stab by that plumbing contractor. But I think John's looking into that. So, and then we had the discussion, if I can introduce, like, which makes sense given what I just presented, you know, is it worth putting this money into something that you're eventually going to replace? And the discussion we had was that, you know, if everything goes well, you have one rooftop unit by the spring, but you can't really guarantee that if you don't have your funding and the project out for bid and a contractor right now. So you really would be running a risk even this winter for some level of heating, but in particular, as we get to the summertime, to not have that system up and running to the best of its ability. So, and that could be, as you might have seen, it might be 2 or 3 years before AC5 finds its way to be replaced with a rooftop unit. So putting in that money now buys you time so you don't have to panic. So I think that's my summary on those, Karen.
Thank you. Now, Karen, is there anything else we wanted to ask Jim to leave with us before he departs?
Not Jim. I want John to stay on for the stormwater discussion, but I think that was everything for Jim.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank
Thank
you, Matt.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Jim, bye.
Be well. Take care.
You too.
Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
So for the purpose of giving John an opportunity to speak so he doesn't have to sit through the entire meeting, perhaps he can give us a little background on what the stormwater, right?
Yes.
The stormwater system.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, in the fall, we had Sterling Stormwater to do their normal yearly check of the system. And we have a lot of silt in the system. We got some repairs that have to be made inside the system. And also the filters have to be changed. And the filters in this whole system actually is a state requirement to have this. It's not a thing that we just could say, you know, we do, we don't do it, but it's a state requirement to get this in the working order. So one of the things that Sterling Stormwater suggested is that to minimize the pump truck, they would pump out as much water out of the system as possible and then bring the pump truck in to pull out the silt. So the amount of money that we would have for this pump truck, instead of $8,000 for 2 days, we may be able to get away with just $4,000 of 1 day with the pump truck. So we're talking about roughly about $12,000, $13,000 on that.
Mm-hmm.
In your packet, there are pictures that show the storm drain or the storm filtration system and what it looks like today. So you have the in your packet.
John, I have a question regarding that, the pictures in particular. As you know, we repaired a sinkhole. The sinkhole had a lot of construction trash, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
Is there a possibility that what the change that occurred in the stormwater system is similar to or because of a sinkhole, and that stormwater system is not it's losing integrity right now?
Well, we haven't been into. We've been there every year
Right.
in the stormwater system. So a yearly thing shows that this year we need to take care of the filters.
Okay.
There's a few maintenance items inside the filtration system itself and in the piping system that have to be taken care of. That might be part of the sinkhole, but you don't know until you get into it, because what happened is you got some settling going on in there.
Okay.
We saw with the sinkhole, the settling was due to the material that was thrown into it.
Mm-hmm.
Was the same thing done there? You know, we only did AC4 or AC well pump 4, so we don't really have a feel for what's on the other end of the parking lot.
Okay. Karen, were there any other items we needed to bring up in this?
No, I
Alright.
don't think so. I think that was everything for John.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, John, let me thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's good to see you. Stay well.
You too.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Have a good.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. So Karen, I don't want folks to forget the things we just went over. We'll review it when we get to the resolutions towards the end of the list, just to make sure everybody has a grasp of some of these details, which we're not always familiar with. If you're ready, we're up to the director's report.
Oh, I already did that.
Oh, that's finished. Okay.
It's abbreviated.
That's,
Abbreviated, exactly.
that's fine. Between the committee, the director's report and the report of the staff meeting, I think you're ready to publish. On the president's report, I will give a brief update on the WLS monthly meeting, which I attended. There's nothing new. The reality is that the trustees are obligated by the bylaws of the WLS to be in contact and communicate with the trustees of their assigned libraries. They don't do that. There's a resolution that I submitted for you, our board, to consider in regarding the lack of attention, but it's poorly written. And when we get to resolution 57, I'm going to ask to table it because it's not clear and it's lacking information. What it needs to say is that for 3 years and over 36 Ossining Board of Trustee meetings, there's been no communication. Hasn't been any representation, and a complete lack of attention from WLS. And they're in violation of their own bylaws. So I don't intend to name names. I think they should be and could be embarrassed, or they'll ignore us because we're only a member of WLS. We have no authority with them. And that's the president's report.
Can I ask
So
a
will
quick
this
question?
ever see light of day? I mean, will the other members potentially see this grievance we have?
Not unless I contact them, which I was considering shooting an email out to every president of the wards of every library to see if they would answer one question. That is, when is the last time you had communication or attendance by a WLS trustee? And I'd be surprised
That's a
if
fair
it's more than
question.
5%.
Mhm.
I don't know if 10% would respond or 5% would say yes.
I
Remind
will
me.
say that when we do pass the resolution, we've passed a couple of resolutions having to do with WLS. I do send it along to Terry and their board president, so they're aware. At least
Well, as a
they're aware.
footnote, I will say that this group of trustees has for years abrogated their responsibility by creating communication and a dialogue with the member libraries. So they come to depend on the staff and the executive director, in this case, Terry, not only to communicate to the member libraries, but to create a relationship with them. And that's largely done through the directors and the PLDA. And they don't really understand that that's what's happening. So that's my mission in life, to get them to see the light.
Can I just ask a quick question, a follow-up here?
Of course.
I can't remember who appoints these trustees, but I thought it was Terry and the
No,
people
Terry,
at WLS. Who appoints the trustees?
the other trustees of the board nominate individuals when there's a
Oh.
vacancy, and the board is supposed to vote on it at their annual meeting. That hasn't happened lately either. They hold those elections in their regular meetings, and that's a violation of their own bylaws. But
Yeah.
when it's brought to their attention, they say, "Yep, change is hard."
Huh.
Very strange. Very strange.
What would you like to see them do besides visit us and talk
Well,
to us?
But if they were to
I mean-
visit us, then we can go on record. The whole purpose of my putting a resolution out that isn't really a formal complaint is just to get their attention. What I'd love to see is if they come to the meetings, that there's some pressure from the trustees to the trustees that technology's not working, fix it. That you're bringing an agreement for us to pay for services that don't work. Well, if this were an outside vendor, we wouldn't even give them payments for when the product or the service doesn't work. Yet WLS says if the libraries don't pay the fees, we'll withhold the funding they get from the state, or we'll charge them penalties. That's not a dialogue. That's an adversarial relationship. I'd love to see a dialogue because this is going downhill. You have
No.
not only Ossining, but I don't know, Karen, you know how many libraries are pulling away from WLS in every fashion they can, whether it's technology or anything else. And I will add one more thing because I can't let go of this subject. If you consider that the libraries and the trustees are on the same side of the equation, they're advocates for libraries, we're advocates for libraries, they're volunteers, we're volunteers. How many trustees, library trustees are in this county or in the system? Is it 150? Is it 200 trustees that they don't talk to? That their bylaws say they should be talking to? That's what I'm looking to get accomplished, the dialogue. First step. Thank you for letting me vent. So we are up to the policy and bylaws and personnel committee report. If you're ready, Amanda. Or Karen,
Okay,
or Amanda.
well, included in your packet was a chart from the committee that basically captured our discussions on the different policies that are, I guess, some of them are presented before you tonight, and others we are still in discussion about. I don't know if it's essential to go through each one, or can I assume that everybody's looked at this and maybe we can entertain questions if there are any?
I don't have any.
Well, I would like to say that I had hoped that Karen would reach out, but I reached out and asked for a meeting with her to talk about the records policy, because there's a very simple analogy here, which I haven't made lately, but I made early on, which is that you would never provide an access to library materials without first organizing them, cataloging them, delineating their location on the shelf. In other words, managing them. You would manage your library materials, then you would provide access. And so to have an access policy without any kind of records management, which is something I've done for well on 30 years, doesn't make sense to me. And so if any of you have done records management without doing a records management policy, I'd be interested to know how that works.
I have not, so I don't know. I don't have a clear understanding of what you are proposing we entertain. I just know that we were pretty much following the advice in putting this policy forward of our lawyer, and also initiating or putting into play the current policy from the state, which we have to vote and approve on by January 1st.
Well, we actually are behind arrears
So
anyway. For many years, we
maybe-
haven't had a policy. So that's why I suggested it in 2013 when this crew came on, some of them. A records management policy is just different. It's separate from a records access policy, which is part of the records management policy. And so I had presented that records policy that the WLS had used and had asked all of its member libraries to use. So it's interesting that Matt is making the big point that there's no dialogue or whatever. There used to be a lot more exchange between Terry and the libraries and recommendations made. So I thought it was a very simple thing. Let's pass the records policy and then we can move on from there. But managing records is an activity. It's not something you just pass. It's not a reference book or source. It's an activity that you have to carry out.
I know that I read all the information you sent us, Lucinda, and that it was dated 2013.
Well, records
possibly,
policies can be updated, but it's basically still good. What you do in terms of a records policy, and Karen knows this, is you manage your records, whether they're historical records or business records or whatever specific records you're required to maintain. But a records policy, like any other policy, tells you how you do it. It's like, how do you rent a meeting room? Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How do you manage your records? Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How do you provide access? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, every policy has steps that you must approve. So that's the point that I'm making. And I don't understand the difficulty in understanding that. Seems very clear, very straightforward.
But we also
But-
have a source that provides us with guidance that these resolutions would be acceptable in the current state of affairs.
A records access policy is perfectly fine, but if you don't have a management policy in place, then just like I said, it's like telling people you're going to give them a book, but not having it cataloged and it's not on the shelf and you don't know the location. So you can't provide access to it. So these are further discussions
So
that must be
just to-
had if people don't understand. The records policy is a
Since I-
10-page policy, basically, the records policy that WLS recommends all of the libraries have and utilize and carry out. And one of the reasons that Jim Farrell didn't want to do it was because he wanted to throw records away at will, which is against, you know, the legal principles of the records management guidelines.
One of the things that this particular book lays out is just that. It defines and delineates which records we have to maintain and for how long, and which ones we can dispose of after how long. And that's why this particular policy is very important for us to have. We're currently under the previous policy that we adopted, I think it was last year, and New York State has made some updates, and I think that they're good updates. They consolidated a lot of this so that they don't have all these random records retention schedules floating around. So this book does, it prevents, I mean,
Yeah, it's a resource book. It's
well,
also used by
what
the-
we're required to use.
The WLS records policy pulls all of the library records that we're supposed to be managing from all those guidelines, those 411 pages. But not all of those 411 pages are relevant to our library records and to our system. They're not.
So if I understand what you're saying, we still need to come up
So
with
we
a
need to
policy for
manage our
managing the
records
records.
first.
But
And
it
I will
doesn't,
vote for, I'm sorry, I would vote for this policy in a minute if we go ahead and have a records management policy first.
all right,
You understand
that-
what I'm saying?
I have a question. I go down to the 5,000 and I see all of the records that we retain and they're dated and labeled and organized. And if somebody said you need to pull the, you know, the checks that were deposited from, you know, 2003, we know exactly what box that is.
And
we
why
could
do you have
that
those?
immediately?
Why do you have those?
Yeah, we followed it all along. We have
No, records retentions guidelines, you only keep them for a certain amount of time, Molly, you know
Right.
that. And then you get rid of them. You don't want to have records that you don't need to keep legally.
exactly. We have some that have dates. This is the destruction date. It's written on the side of the box. You pull that box and it gets sent to shred.
yeah, so I think what's happening is the fact that we have a resolution for the public access and a resolution for retention and disposition doesn't discount that we do have a policy for managing the records.
No, we don't. Karen, can you show us the policy for managing the records?
The policy that we
writing?
use
In
to manage the
writing.
records currently is the current one from New York State that is expiring at the end of December.
No,
Once
that's a
January rolls
record
around-
schedule. It's not a policy telling you how to do it. It doesn't
Well,
tell you how to.
there's also I think there might be a little confusion between procedure and policy. The board sets the policy and the library staff create procedures internally so that we can act on that policy. The board doesn't tell us when we're following the meeting room use policy. The board does not tell us step by step what to do with that. The board sets a policy and internally we work out the procedure so that we know what the workflow is.
And so you have a records policy in writing though that I could see?
We have the current records retention schedule from New York State, which we follow.
How do you follow it?
Exactly how Molly described it.
Annually, Kathy, Bob, we look at what we're supposed to retain, how we're supposed to retain it. It gets packaged up into labeled boxes and the boxes get stacked and organized in the 5,000. Some of them say permanent retention. Some of them have a date when they can be destroyed. We try to keep the permanent separate from the others just for ease and convenience.
I know Kathy also scans some of the records. So there's a backup for them.
So
Well,
at this
maybe,
time-
maybe then what I'm not seeing is any kind of a listing of how you go about doing all of this. That's what I think trustees
So
need to know, that so the
the-
records don't get thrown away.
The procedure will be documented, and that can in time be adopted as a policy. So we'll do it, we'll get it done. But for the purposes of having made your point, I think it's clear that both the director and the assistant director know that you're looking for a written policy for managing the records, not just the procedure.
Yes, yeah, that's clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And that I
Amanda,
think should be done.
okay. Amanda, was there anything else that you wanted to present to us? Any other policies? Did we have a first reading?
We are going tonight to have, let me see, I'm just going back, sorry.
See,
The second reading on the FOIL, Freedom of Information Act, also known as Policy Access to Records Policy and Application. That's the second reading tonight. Then there will be a first reading for the Professional Development and Membership Policy.
okay.
There's going to be a first reading for library equipment use. I think if there were no changes made, I have to go through and see if it's on the agenda. That was
The equipment use policy is still with the department heads.
Ah,
okay. Thank you.
Sure.
And the first reading for New York State Retention and Disposition Schedule. That was on the agenda tonight also.
That's on the agenda. Good. Good. Thank you, Amanda. Karen, did the Finance Committee have any need to, did you have any questions or subjects for the Finance Committee to review at this time?
No, just as a little heads up, right now we're wrapping up the audit. Well, I don't want to say we're wrapping up the audit. Bob is putting together his part of the audit. The auditors are coming in Wednesday to start the on-site work of the audit. So we'll have that to go over. I don't want to say soon, but we're getting to that point, and I'll want the Finance Committee to have the first review of the audit. Also, as we get towards budget planning time, in December, Bob and I start working on numbers. So the Finance Committee should be, probably maybe have a joint meeting where we go over the audit and then start talking about the budget. But, Althema and I and you, Matt, can decide how we want to do that.
Okay. And I had a question on the funding that we will officially be receiving for the boiler for the furnace. So congratulations that the money's come through.
Yes, thank you.
And I was wondering, maybe it's something or you could ask Bob, do the funds have to go right back into the budget, into the line item that we use the money to pay for everything, or can we not put that money back into the space that the funds came from to pay for everything that we got, and we can kind of roll that money forward for the next project that we're looking at?
No, this money has to be used for the boiler, this particular project. They're very, very strict about that.
Okay, well, very good. Buildings and grounds, I think we did a pretty thorough job. Was there anything else? There were no residual issues with the sinkhole repair?
No, not yet. Knock wood.
Yeah, okay. And then the foundation committee, has there been, I don't know if we've had a meeting since the last.
No, we haven't set a meeting. Althema and I are going to be chatting, I think tomorrow morning, right, Althema? Oh, Althema's on mute. Althema and I are chatting tomorrow morning to strategize a little bit.
Okay, very good. Now we're up to the point of the meeting where we consider resolutions. The first one is number 50, the approval of the public access to records policy and application. And it reads, resolved that the Board of Trustees approves the public access to records revised policy and FOIL Freedom of Information application. Are there any questions or comments regarding resolution number 50? I'll entertain a motion and a second to vote and accept resolution 50.
I abstain.
Okay, Amanda has indicated by a show of hand that she moves, and Shandi seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any objections? And I know we have one abstention. Thank you. Next one is 52, approval of the WLS semi-annual IT invoices. You may recall that this had been tabled because we received a bill from WLS in the amounts of $60,640.99 and $800. At the time, we did not have itemized invoices, and we have since received them. Karen sent a copy out on the 29th of September, at which time it was, for WLS, it was rather extensive. And for my purposes, it does satisfy an explanation of where the money is being spent. The fact that we didn't have any say in negotiating the contract is a different issue. But I would recommend that we accept the invoice and approve payment. So at this time, I'll entertain, if there are no questions or comments, a motion to accept Resolution 52, approval of WLS semi-annual IT invoices.
I guess I'm just confused, Matt, because you were so adamant last time that we didn't accept this,
Yes.
and now you're suggesting we should?
We
So
were
I'm just
lacking,
confused.
yes, because we were lacking an itemized invoice that explained what the money was being spent on. And Karen forwarded to us on the 29th of September that information.
Okay.
So that's why I feel at this time it would be appropriate to continue
Okay.
our perfect record of having paid all their bills. So if there are no other
Okay.
questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion at this time to accept Resolution 52. And a second, Kathy, you got those? Kathy's on mute. So all those in favor of Resolution 52, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any objections or any abstentions? There being none, it passes. Move on to resolution number 55, the approval of the LGS1 retention and disposition schedule. Resolved, it reads, by the Ossining Public Library Board of Trustees that retention and disposition schedule for New York local government records issued pursuant to Article 57A of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Law and containing legal minimum retention periods for local government records is hereby adopted for use by all officers in legally disposing of valueless records listed therein. Further resolved that in accordance with Article 57A, only those records will be disposed of that are described in retention and disposition schedule for New York local government records after they have met the minimum retention periods described therein. B, only those records will be disposed of that do not have sufficient administrative, fiscal, legal, or historical value to merit retention beyond established legal minimum periods. Were there any questions, Amanda? Yes, Shanti, please.
No, I don't have a question.
Hi. Okay. Sorry.
So moved.
Okay, and a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of passing Resolution 55, please indicate by saying aye.
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 I
Any objection?
abstained. I
And one
abstained.
abstention. And the motion carries. We're up to Resolution 56, personnel changes. Resolved that the Board of Trustees approves the following personnel changes. Karen, with any additional comments or explanations that might be appropriate for the two individuals listed?
Sure, yes. As you know from our discussions at the last executive session, we have offered Marie Pierre a full-time librarian one position, and she accepted. We are all very happy about that. Also, in addition, one of our part-time library clerks has requested a year's leave of absence per the union contract. A leave of absence requires approval of the Board of Trustees. Unpaid, this is an unpaid leave of absence.
So you'll be replacing her, right?
We would temporarily replace her, and
Yeah.
then if and when she returns to us, then we would let that replacement person go,
Yeah.
unless we have another opening.
There are no further questions or comments. I'll entertain a motion to vote on Resolution 56, personnel changes. And we have a motion from Cecilia and a second from Amanda. All those in favor of accepting Resolution 56, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions at this time? There being none, it passes for the individuals so listed. I've requested that Resolution 57 be tabled unless there is an objection or discussion on that. And we can move to Resolution 58, the Network Support Company. Resolution 58 reads approval of the Network Support Company retainer renewal. Resolved that the Board of Trustees approves the Network Support Company retainer renewal dated 10/8/2020 for an additional term of 12 months effective September 1, 2020. Now, Karen, we did receive this in the packet. I didn't have any additional questions. Was there any information you can add to it? So we're ready to
Sure.
vote.
Yep, this is just a reminder, this is the new IT company that we've been using to move off of WLS. We do an hourly retainer with them. This first year, we knew that we weren't going to use a lot of the hours. It was mostly consulting. So we have a good number of hours left over on the current contract, which then roll over. They come with us. We don't lose those hours. And as we start building out our network, we're going to have more use of their services in setting us up. They've been really great to work with. They've been very responsive. We get regular reports from them about their service calls and our security. And it's like a breath of fresh air.
Wow, great.
Very good. There are no other questions or comments. I'll entertain a motion to accept Resolution 58 at this time. And Cecilia, and we have a second with Amanda. And all those in favor of Resolution 58, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? There being none, that carries. We're up to Resolution 59, approval of the Clean Air Quality Service proposals for air conditioner number 5. And we went through some of the details with Mr. Dolan and with Mr. Tortosa. And we do need to make these repairs. But Karen, I have a question. The document that was submitted doesn't itemize the labor costs, and it doesn't itemize the parts in that cost. And what, I forgot the phrase for labor. Did it have to be something called a standard rate or an established rate or something? We once ran
Like
into
an
trouble.
hourly rate?
Yes, we once ran into trouble with a maintenance company because they weren't paying the
Oh, prevailing wage.
prevailing
Yes,
wage.
yes. Clean air most definitely pays prevailing wage, and they provide us with that information.
Well, I don't know. If you feel that we're covered on prevailing wage, what about a breakdown, an itemized breakdown on labor and the parts?
We can
that
certainly
unreasonable?
get that and put off the repair until the next meet, or the approval of the repair until the next meeting.
Okay, would you consider it appropriate if the board were to accept this resolution?
Pending
based
more
on-
detail.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you could
that's-
distribute that to us when you get it.
Yep, absolutely. Let me just make myself a note in a place where I will see it.
So
Okay.
we're amending Resolution 59 to add
Yes.
pending a itemized
Receipt of Itemized.
labor and
Labor.
parts breakdown. So we, unless there are other questions or comments, ready to vote on Resolution 59, I will entertain a motion.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So this is, AC5 is part of what they were just discussing?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Ooh.
So even though one of the segments of the overall project in repairing our AC could be to replace the system, at the earliest, it could be 2 or 3 years away. And we really need to keep this weak system up and running before it's replaced. So I will entertain, if there are no other questions or comments, a motion to vote on resolution number 59 and a second. And we have a second as well as a motion. All those in favor of passing resolution 59 with the pending details, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? or-
Abstention.
One abstention at this time. Thank you, Sean.
Mhm.
And we're up to resolution 60. Approval of repairs to the stormwater system. Just to refresh everyone's memory, John Tortosa went over this and indicated that this is an annual investigation and review, and it's in need of repair, and there's a state requirement that we keep it up to date. And resolved, it reads that the Board of Trustees approves the proposals from Sterling Stormwater Service in the amount of $8,800 for necessary repairs and installation of filter cartridges, etc., and inspection of work performed by a third-party vacuum truck contractor. The vacuum pump truck will be provided by Fred A. Cook Service at the rate of $4,000 per day for a maximum of 2 days at $8,000. Karen, again, we don't have itemized labor, itemized. Are there warranties on these parts? It didn't say. I'd be open to asking the board to vote on this with the stipulation that it can only proceed if we get the itemized details. Is that fair, Karen?
That's fair. I'll see
Okay.
if I can get that from them.
I also have another question that I didn't really understand. The filter cartridges, which are sort of off kilter, if I've got that right. This
Sort
is
of,
the
yeah.
very first time this has happened.
I'm sorry, say that last part again, Amanda.
Is this a first time this has happened, or has this happened in the past also?
I would have, since I've been there in 2015, I can tell you that each year when we get our inspection, we're not, nothing is being flagged as being askew or amiss. So since I've been here, this is the first time that has come up.
And so if I understood John correctly, when they get the water out, they're going to be able to determine what the cause of that was.
Possibly. If they can see it. I would expect that if the cause is because of ground shifting, they would see cracking or some such thing. I just don't know. It depends on what they see when they get down there.
So potentially this could be more of a problem than what we're seeing right now.
Knowing our building, quite possibly, yes.
So we're talking about potentially a temporary fix, or
possibly.
We're working our way towards solving the problem. I'm concerned.
This particular problem.
Yeah.
Oh, they've identified what needs to be repaired. If they're unable to repair it, they won't know till they're in there.
Yes.
And if that's a result of something greater, they won't know till they're in there.
Right. And I guess what I'm saying is if they see evidence of a more serious problem, we will know, they'll let us know at the time, but we're not going to know that going in because they can't see what they need to see.
And John thought that possibly the vacuum pump truck will take 1 day, not 2. So is that the source of the bill being higher than what I think that somewhere I read potentially this is a higher bill than what
we would pay. Yes, if the vacuum truck can get it done in 1 day, the bill would be $4,000 less than the total.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we still need to vote on resolution 60. Entertain a motion to accept resolution 60, approval of repairs to stormwater system, and a second if possible.
With the provision that they do identify their costs and labor and everything.
Most definitely,
specifically.
with the provision that we get the details on prevailing wage, itemized labor, warranties, and costs. All those in favor of accepting resolution 60, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any abstentions or objections? There being none, that carries. Well, I don't know why tonight I feel like a professor that the class is sleeping and no one really wants to go over this stuff. It's very exciting. It really is. You don't have to do it every week though. And we're now up to that exciting point of our program where where old business is empty. New business has been completed. There's no public comment. Karen, were there any other topics that aren't on the agenda?
The only thing I wanted to mention that I did not remember to say during my director's report, we are a polling place November 3rd. We don't get a chance to say no to this. We just have to do it. We're obligated. On that particular day, it's a Tuesday, obviously. Normally we would be open for browsing hours from 12 to 6. I don't feel it's wise for us to do that for that particular day.
Right.
So we're just going to stick with curbside and library by appointment. And that will help us to keep the polling stuff going downstairs and the library stuff going upstairs and keep it as separated as we possibly can.
And how responsible, or what responsibilities does a library have in the polling area for cleaning, for sanitizing, for?
Good point.
The representative from the Board of Elections said that the poll workers, they have poll workers who will be wiping things down and that kind of thing. Our building and grounds folks have the obligation to let people in the building at 5 o'clock in the morning, help them with any, they're supposed to take care of all their setup, but of course our B&G staff would help them with that. And then after all is said and done, the B&G staff will do a very thorough clean of the whole downstairs, the doors, the high touch surfaces and that kind of thing. We're also, Molly is going to be having additional buildings and ground staff on site for potential emergencies, but also to do as much cleaning as they can of the library spaces, the handrails, et cetera, et cetera.
Are they going to bring the voting machine in the day before?
Usually they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one that, like, they have those little kiosks where people color in their circles or check marks or whatever, and then they have an electronic machine that processes the ballot.
Yes.
Well, you're shaking your head, Amanda.
It's changed this year.
Oh, has it?
Yeah, you're going to be doing so much of it electronically.
Oh.
Well, actually, well, you are going to be, anyway, you'll see.
Well, I actually mailed my ballot in already, so I'm not going to see.
Karen, why is the library a polling place? What, like, I know you said something about it, but I don't understand, like, why aren't the polling places that previously were polling places enough?
The polling places that cannot be polling places this year are the ambulance, what do they call them? Ambulance headquarters and fire headquarters. They made the case that due to COVID, it is really not safe for them to be polling places and still doing their emergency work. Previously, nursing homes were polling places.
Yep.
Bethel Nursing Home is our normal polling place, and for obvious reasons, they can't do it. And because we receive public money, if you receive like $1 of public money, you can be pressed into service to be a polling place.
Got it.
Also, in the and a lot of those other polling places, the air ventilation is not good. You know, so this is far better at the library than like at Firehouse number 2 in Millwood, for instance.
Isn't that a brand new firehouse?
Maybe it's Firehouse number 1. I get the two confused. But in the old one where I've been for years, it's a tiny little room, the polling place. And anyway.
Yeah. So that's
schools are closed on election day, right?
Yes.
But the library is open.
Yes, sort of.
Okay.
We're sort of open.
Right. You're
Curbside.
Yeah, you're just keeping curbside
and by appointment.
Open. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We're also going to bring the curbside upstairs So that's another change that we're starting in November. And that will be helpful on polling day, where our circulation staff are going to, we're going to have to do PR and stuff like that so everybody knows and change the signage. But our circulation staff, as we get busier and busier, it's a lot easier for them to manage delivering curbside on
To be upstairs.
to the upstairs.
Yeah.
And that'll really help on election day.
Yeah.
Keep the two separate.
When you get a book now via curbside, there's a new message that comes up after you filled in everything. And it used to be you filled in everything and then it was like, you get your book. But now it asks, would you like to get your book outside at the curb or come into the library to pick it up?
Oh, interesting. They just recently had an upgrade, so that might be part of it.
Yes, I think I got that. I picked up something on Sunday, I believe.
Interesting.
Or yesterday. No, maybe it was anyway.
Time is meaningless these days.
So does anyone else have any questions for any other subjects or comments before we go into exec?
No.
So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to leave it, to end this portion of our meeting, go into executive session. And we need a motion and a second. And
moved.
we have those, Kathy. All in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye. And we thank you very much, Kathy, for
Good
all of
night.
your attention.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Molly.
Molly,
Bye.
thank you very much.
Bye.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. There we go.
Okay, now we've returned to our meeting and we have one item. We'll have to ask Kathy to assign it a resolution unless it's numbered. I don't have it in front of me.
Number 61.
Thank you very much. And to refresh everyone's memory, it reads that, Karen, do you have it in front of you?
I have it right in front of me. Resolved that the Board of Trustees approves a retroactive 2% salary increase for confidential employee number 4422, effective July 1, 2019, and a 2% retroactive salary increase effective July 1, 2020.
Thank you. If there's no discussion, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any abstentions or objections? There being none, it carries. At
Thank
this
you.
time, if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to. Is that
So
a question?
moved.
And
So moved.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I meant to bring up one thing with either old business, new business, but in terms of board development, can we, I would like to propose that we have another board development date set in the future, because we don't have a date that we were going to meet again.
The only date I have is Monday, the 26th for the strategic plan. So I don't have a date for that either.
So
Perhaps we can do that in an email in the interest of time, because unless you have a date to propose, and we could just take a quick look at our calendars.
I think we should all thank Cecilia for last week.
yes.
Oh.
She did a fabulous
That
job.
was
Don't
great.
thank her. She's got to do the next one and the next one.
I have to send you my written summary because there were some more movies I thought of, cute animations to be continued.
And also, by the way, as we if we do engage a consultant, they will assist in this process too.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So Amanda, would you be okay if we kind of did it in like an email, pick the date?
Yes, and
Okay.
maybe that would, yes, maybe we could even on the 26th pick a date. I just don't, I
Okay.
want to be sure we stay on track with
Mhm.
and continue our
Right.
conversations.
We want it to be like a standing item.
All right.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Then we'll entertain a motion to end our meeting tonight.
So moved.
Thank everyone for being patient, putting the time in. Your efforts are appreciated. Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Alice
Thank you all.
raised her hand, and who else raised their hand?
I did.
You did? Okay, you can do that?
No, you did.
All right, give me a good name. Anybody second it?
I'll do it. I'll second.
All right, thank you. I don't want Kathy to yell at me. All right, thanks.
Everyone stay well.
Thanks,
You
everyone.
too. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.